Hello everyone, it's your host, SethTheProgrammer, and today we're going to be going over a little hypothetical that I thought would be kind of interesting to talk about. This hypothetical is based off the comparison Minato made to Obito, saying that nobody should be able to slip into the village and control the Nine Tails with such efficiency unless it was Madara Uchiha himself. Obito doesn't confirm or deny this, however, Minato goes into battle with that in mind, and while he is certainly on edge, he is almost confident and level-headed in his confrontation with someone who may be one of the most legendary shinobi of all time, let alone the present, and the legends that surround him, and Madara's namesake being considered power within itself, something that the entire shinobi world recognizes even in the Fourth Great Ninja War. Yet here's Minato ready to try and protect the village with everything he has, even after being caught by surprise by Obito's Kamui, which Minato refers to as a space-time ninjutsu that surpasses both his and the second Hokage Tobirama Senju's flying Raijin. So what if Minato was fully on the money and he actually had to face the real Madara Uchiha, and how would that actually go? Before we get started though, let me just take a moment and say that if you haven't already, please consider subscribing and liking the video if you do like it, and maybe you've seen me around, watch me more than once. People often confuse me in my videos with other people all the time, and it's really awkward because they forget to subscribe, so try not to make that mistake yourself. Minato Namikaze is a shinobi described as having a natural-born talent like a shining glint, only being rivaled by characters like Itachi Uchiha, who became a Jinchuriki slaying Akatsuki member anywhere debatably between 12 and 14, depending on who you ask, and Gaara, who became Kazekage before Naruto even finished training with Jiraiya to learn the giant Rasengan, despite being near in age. Minato also slayed thousands of rock shinobi almost single-handedly and pretty much won the Third Great Ninja War for the Leaf side of things, only ever repeatedly fighting foes like Unruly A, the son of the Third Raikage, and the perfect Jinchuriki of the Hachibi, Killer B, and possibly all the others they could have had in their platoons from time to time. Maybe even Darui or C could have been involved, we're not too sure. This earned Minato the namesake the Yellow Flash, and would be praised by all other ninja as being the greatest in godlike speed, even compared to a somewhat younger Third Hokage who was nearing the end of his God of Shinobi era, all of the Sannin, Hanzo in his prime, the Third Raikage, Kakazu, Sasori, the Yahoko era Akatsuki, Fugaku Uchiha, a much younger Chiyo, Anoki, and the list honestly goes on and on. It got so bad with Minato pretty much solo stomping the Rock Village that Anoki didn't really know how to respond, and this dominance in Orochimaru's strange descent into madness is what would allow Minato to become the Fourth Hokage. Now, while the Uchiha being manipulated by Obito on the sidelines didn't like Minato being chosen over Fugaku, the rest of the ninja world kind of understood why he was put there and respected the decision. However, Minato had many failures, and those would come back to haunt him when Obito alongside the Nine Tails would attack Konoha. Now, while Minato could have actually survived the Nine Tails attack on Konoha, this would result in the loss of the Nine Tails, and the Bijou balance would be destroyed, and the motherly message he wanted Naruto to hear from Kushina, so he sacrificed himself. He wasn't technically defeated by the Nine Tails attack as much as people think, rather exhausted from teleporting the Nine Tails around its Bijou bombs and then defeating Obito. And this entire situation, as I said earlier, is presented as a sacrifice, not really a defeat, in which Minato claims that his family is shinobi and that is their duty to do things like that. Despite Kushina claiming that sealing the Nine Tails away is possible without him dying, I outlined more of this in my Minato Is Underrated video, which a lot of you seem to enjoy and I recommend to those who haven't seen it. Here, however, we have to analyze whether or not Minato would have this same ability against the actual Madara Uchiha, and whether Obito was just so hacks that he could somewhat stall out Minato, or if Madara is such a powerhouse that hacks abilities don't even matter. While we went over Minato's lore, we have to go over some of his actual scaling. Minato is often presented as a very high Kage level combatant and tends to be the gauge that Naruto is compared to throughout the series. An example, when Naruto completed the Rasen Shuriken, it was intended to be a jutsu that even Minato couldn't complete. Now, while Minato doesn't have Naruto's insane ability to spam clones due to his chakra and died pretty prematurely. This isn't really a focus. The focus here is that the Rasen Shuriken that took down Kakuzu's lives in his transformed state, in which Kakuzu thought was an insane power that he shouldn't even let touch him, claiming it was befitting of the Nine Tails Jinchuriki because it's the strongest tailed beast. This is led up by Naruto wanting to defeat Kakuzu solo, not only to prove he can surpass the fourth Hokage like Kakashi said, but also to ease his insecurity about his inferiority to Sasuke, who he still was comparing himself to. In manga volume 39, it's actually stated, while the threat of the criminal organization known as the Akatsuki looms over present, Naruto's former classmates Shikamaru, Choji, and Ino embark on a mission to find Captain Asuma's killer. And when their quest brings them into conflict with Kakuzu, one of the Akatsuki's deadliest members, it's Naruto who takes the enemy down with a display of power that rivals even the fourth Hokage himself. Meaning that this power is something that rivals Minato's. If we say that Minato can output around as much power as Naruto's incomplete Rasen Shuriken that can shred apart Kakuzu, then we can somewhat get a scale, as obviously we know that Kakuzu was able to take on perfect Jinchuriki of the Two Tails Yugito in her complete tailed beast state and actually defeat her alongside Hidan. Hidan is arguably and almost self-admittedly the weakest member of the Akatsuki, implying that Kakuzu did most of the heavy lifting, as well as Kakuzu blatantly getting attacked and tagged by Yugito on panel, and actually finishing the battle many hours later without so much as really a scratch or any hearts lost. Yet Naruto's Rasen Shuriken that rivals the power of the fourth Hokage shreds him apart. This is consistent in all actuality, as we know that even with just a kunai, let alone a jutsu, a younger Minato that probably wasn't even in his prime quite yet was able to cut through the perfect Jinchuriki of the Eight Tails and his partial transformations with just the said kunai, and arguably a young unruly A who could fight the full Eight Tails and chop apart its horns, let alone Minato's full power with a Rasengan, Killer Bee's partial transformations being able to catch small bijou bombs from Kurama, and should actually scale and be relative to his full self's limbs, and it puts this in a considerable tier. You could argue that this technique and level of power is more so something that represents Naruto's ability to reach Minato's levels of talents. However, this seems like a lot of linguistic gymnastics, but even if you did, the Eight Tails and A feat still remain. This is once again solidified by the fourth Hokage thinking that he was convinced nobody could actually have defeated Minato, which would of course include B, who fought him many times, as stated in the databooks and even shown on panel. There's also one thing I want to bring up when we talk about Minato, which is something presented in the Naruto Storm Generations game. Now, while this is a video game, there's a very interesting statement and interview with CyberConnect 2 about the game's story mode that I'm going to quote here. In quote, Naruto and Sasuke will obviously have the biggest arcs, but the game will also allow players to experience the backstories of others such as Minato Namikaze and Itachi Uchiha. In particular, the developers and animation studios have worked very closely together to create new content that will be considered canon, which adds up around 60 minutes of additional anime content. End quote. And this would include stuff like Itachi versus Kisame and Minato dodging base Naruto's punches while having almost zero chakra. The same base Naruto could fend off fatigue Tendo pain momentarily. And another interesting concept brought up in the game is the possibility of Minato having actually sparred with Hiruzen and Jiraiya before becoming Hokage and then defeating them both, although it's somewhat implied Hiruzen and Jiraiya could have been holding back in Minato's opinion, but this could just be him doubting his own ability as well. This is also not in the anime cutscenes of the game, which are what are stated to be worked on as canon, and yes, anime canon is a big deal, as obviously we know that Kishimoto put things in the Naruto manga intentionally to feed into the anime. It was all worked on closely together, such as Sakura's love letter and so on. I just thought I'd touch up on this here rather than later. I don't think it's too important for the scaling, but if you do consider, maybe you think Minato destroyed Hiruzen and this game has some canon content in it, somehow they link, maybe it matters, but it seems a little bit like a stretch to me, so I'm not going to be using too much of it. So in terms of speed, we know Jonin Minato can blitz around Jonin A by a considerable margin, and Naruto's ability to react to the fourth Hokage was considered somewhat like a yellow flash feat. Even the second and third Hokages recognize Minato's speed in the war as phenomenal, and he's able to react and teleport away a 10 Tails Bijou Dama and teleport it a long distance away. He's also able to react to the full 9 Tails and is generally considered uncontested when it comes to speed. With this, you can kind of gather that Minato lore-wise is considered a step above perfect Jinchuriki for the most part. He's generally considered to be stronger or able to defeat the Akatsuki members individually, although there may be some debatable exceptions like Itachi and so on. He is not at all impressed with Pain in comparison to the threat of Obito coming back in the future, who he already defeated, despite the fact that in the original weekly run of the manga, Pain was actually stated to be the strongest man in the Akatsuki, at least in terms of raw power. If you think someone can defeat Pain with like hacks or something else, then sure, but in terms of raw power, they state Pain is the strongest, and Minato thought he wasn't as big as a threat as Obito and merely a puppet. Now, whether this is because Obito is insanely fast, or he's insanely hacked, or he can summon and control the Nine Tails, might be a factor here, rather than just his base, punching power, but regardless, that's generally where Minato scales. Minato also has many other abilities that sort of raises his tier astronomically, which I will go over later. Madara, on the other hand, kind of just scoffs at the idea of Bijou and Kage entirely, and is kind of his own animal. We'll be talking about a live Madara that fought Hashirama in the past, and regardless of whether you think a live Madara is stronger than his Edo counterpart, it's not really all too necessary for Madara scaling, as honestly both should be kind of capable of performing their own feats. Like, for instance, scaling to the Nine Tails, you should be able to output as much energy as summoning meteors. That has actually been calced before, so it's not really too big of a deal, but Madara already stated that his battle with the 5 Kage was nothing in comparison to his fight with Hashirama, and pretty much no diff them with his Susanoo, destroying A, Tsunade, Inoki, Gaara, and Mei like nothing, despite teamwork though, He also faced off against Hashirama. Hashirama was able to face Madara's perfect Susanoo and the complete Nine Tails single-handedly and win, a character who Madara and even Kabuto were convinced nobody could ever compete with, and Kabuto thought that no one alive could actually contest Madara except for Hashirama. So there's some interesting statements there when it comes to power scaling. A lot of people try to make a large contrast between Hashirama and Madara due to this. However, their powers are far closer than you probably think, as we know that Madara amped the Nine Tails to be able to fight Sage Hashirama with his majestic attire Susanoo, Sage mode having a massive increase of power to increase the user on its own, and giving the Nine Tails the ability to actually rip off almost all of the arms of his Sage Buddha statue. For those that don't know, Sage mode is sometimes compared to being greater than Curse Mark 2's amp, which is like over 10 times greater. I've seen many arguments. I've seen some people compare it to Naruto fighting his four-tailed self in power, and Kakashi says like it's over like 25 times the chakra difference. So I've seen a lot of arguments for Sage mode, but in this case you can just say, okay, he fought an amped Hashirama, so we don't have to get too headcanon-y. Even after the Nine Tails was subdued, Hashirama is also still in Sage mode, which is what people forget, meaning he was still beyond his base power in their fight, yet Madara was able to push Hashirama to such an extreme that Hashirama could do nothing but collapse from exhaustion after their battle was completed. Even then, some argue that Madara might have actually been on equal terms, having only been caught off guard by Hashirama's wood clone. There's another argument that Hashirama didn't actually want to kill Madara until the very end, kind of like Six Paths Naruto and Sasuke's battle. However, it still can't be denied that Madara is still in the same weight class, that weight class being above QB level. This is very easily demonstrated even during the war arc when Madara is brought back to life and Hashirama says he's regaining his past powers. Even while blind, he shreds apart Sage Naruto and EMS Sasuke with absolutely no difficulty. And even as a heavily suppressed Edo Tensei without even using Susanoo, he casually can fight off Naruto numerous times. EMS Sasuke, who with a Senjutsu amp was just fighting 10 Tails Obito and keeping track of his movements with his Sharingan also, mind you. So obviously in terms of power, Minato has quite literally nothing on Madara. The comparison is completely obsolete. In fact, looking at his fight with Obito where Obito survived a Rasengan directly to his body while only around 14, it might actually be arguable that Minato would have extreme difficulties even damaging Madara whatsoever, if not at all, because obviously perfect Jinchuriki level is nothing to QB+, because half the QB can kind of poop on all of the Bijou at the same time pretty much, so obviously it's not very comparable, especially considering an imperfect Rasen Shuriken was considered Minato's level of power, and then later on we see Sage Naruto almost doubled its strength as confirmed in the databooks, and these Rasen Shuriken don't don't even cause Madara while Edo to flinch while he's suppressed by Hashirama's deity gates and even sealed away and can't use his Renegon abilities. So now while Minato is no slouch in terms of scaling as he faces off against Zetsu Obito, who's a beast in his own right, and Black Zetsu is actually scared of him, but compared to people beyond the full Nine Tails, this is a rather obsolete comparison, with Black Zetsu Obito at best scaling to around EMS Sasuke, who thought Naruto controlling half the Nine Tails powers was an astronomical feat and gave him insecurity, let alone the full thing, plus Madara and so forth. So in this case, you can almost consider the perfect Susanoo of Madara's to rival the full Nine Tails, possibly higher. Then alongside the actual Nine Tails, Madara's packing over 4 times the firepower QB Chakra mode Naruto has with only his half Nine Tails, and then plus himself, who is dwarfed by Kurama's as actually shown in the manga, so bare minimum. So there's no feasible scaling opportunity for Minato. The only thing left that he has is his speed and his hacks abilities. Minato's speed is a very contentious thing, surprisingly, mainly because there's a databook guide that says he is as fast as the 4th Hokage at full speed. So this argument at first seems kind of like a joke, but it's somewhat strong when you consider the following. 1. Naruto is supposed to be surpassing the 4th Hokage throughout the series, rivaling him with his progressions, and this is supposed to be his speed progression by blitzing the 4th Hokage in a similar sense that his Rasen Shuriken was his power progression. 2. The Raikage actually trains, so just because Minato could blitz him when they were younger, doesn't mean the same logic or feats would apply when Minato dies and the Raikage gets to train for free in the meantime. 3. The Raikage's speed is only ever surpassed by QB Chakra Naruto, who has no anti-feats when at full power, such as being able to handle suppressed Edo Madara and Obito for long periods of time while simultaneously protecting the entire Shinobi Alliance. So if the Raikage was actually as fast as Minato, it almost wouldn't be inconsistent with much. However, I've also heard counters say Minato simply has Raikage-like combat speed and possibly has way greater reaction speed that uses in conjunction with his flying Raijin or say his Shunshin, such as when he helped against Ten Tails Madara later in the war. The only problem with Minato helping against Ten Tails Madara though is that it seems like Madara's truth-seeking orbs are consistently countered by lesser members of the cast when they are thrown out and don't seem to be relative to his true max speed, as even non-8 gates guy could react to them somewhat previously, yet Madara can still react to some attacks from the complete 8 gates guy who is far faster later. There's also the point that Minato teleported between Madara and Guy for a moment, which, while I think is a great speed feat, is still somewhat relegated by the fact that Guy intentionally leaped forward on command for the strategy and was skipping through the air rather than moving normally. So the counter argument would be that Guy's air skips are simply nowhere near his normal movement speed, rather than Minato is 8 gates Guy level in speed. Now, I'm not saying these are my arguments or that I agree or disagree. I want to say flat out that it probably doesn't matter too much to our discussion, and I'll explain. The reason it doesn't really matter is because Minato's only offensive ability against Madara is with his sealing jutsu that can seal away a complete Nine Tails level opponent at the cost of his life, and whatever sealing jutsu he has in his arsenal that might be Nine Tails level as well, as his attack potency might potentially even be too weak to even damage non-Susanoo Madara that could clash with Hashirama, could take complete super Rasen Shurikens from Sage Naruto, take out EMS Sasuke and Naruto and so on, let alone his actual full power. This is also negating his Edo Tensei feats a bit, which in all actuality do scale to his alive powers. In this case, Minato would have to remove the contract seal from the Nine Tails with Madara, so let's go over a few win conditions and losing conditions for Madara. So win condition number 1, simply overpower and or out-stamina Minato, which we kind of already went over. Win condition for Madara 2, the Majestic Attire Susanoo. If this happens, it's an instant lose. There is no debate or argument left to be had. Like, the only way Minato wins is if he prevents this from happening, which not only does Minato have literally nothing to damage the Susanoo, we know that he doesn't have the power to seal away such a vast chakra volume anyway without serious risk. So he can't really do anything to stop Madara from just obliterating the Leaf Village or chasing Minato down until he runs out of stamina. Even if Hiruzen came to help and they 2v1 this, they'd still get pretty much no diff, as Hiruzen could barely handle stalling the base Nine Tails, let alone defeating it with Madara. You also might be able to argue that Minato might be able to create flying Raijin barriers to teleport Biju bombs. However, the problem with Madara's QB Susanoo is that he can spam bijou bombs like a machine gun. Like, I'm not even joking. This was shown on panel. He shoots so many bijou bombs that they almost rivaled the amount of hands on Hashirama's Buddha statue. So Minato would have a very hard time teleporting all of that. When conditioned for Minato, 1. Minato with his hypothetical fan-powered 8 gates guy level of speed, instant Reaper Death Seals or Nine-Tail Seals Madara somehow, which even Minato seems to disagree with the ability to do, and then either seals Kurama back into Kushina or dies like he did before. Basically, the win condition for Minato seems like a lot of fan-happy biases that aren't very supported by any of the material in the series, unfortunately. In my personal opinion, I'd say that the gap is just too massive in terms of power. That Madara would just easily destroy the Leaf, and at worst, you'd have to tire out Minato or catch him by surprise, which, considering even Obito could do and react to him numerous times, it doesn't seem like Minato would ever really get away with anything, especially since we know Obito, even with a Renegon, has been tagged, let alone Kid Obito, who Minato got shook by. Basically, while debates like Minato versus Itachi, Minato versus Pain, can Minato beat Kisame, can Minato beat up Kakazu, while those seem kind of interesting, the interesting debate for Madara is, can Madara defeat the entire Akatsuki? So you can kind of see where the gap kind of comes in. Anyways, guys, I hope you enjoyed the video. I'd love to hear your thoughts on the subject, of course, and for this, I would actually recommend, funny enough, my Madara versus the Akatsuki video, respectively, and Minato is Underrated, as of course, I actually am a huge Minato supporter, and there's a lot more stuff in that video that you can learn, such as the Golden Boy era, and how he has actually nerfed during the War arc considerably. So, also in Storm Generations, as I said before, Madara is also shown, and the infamous time reversal Madara Mangekyo ability is actually in the Generations cutscenes, which are stated to be canon. So while this is Obito's actual interpretation of the story as he's telling it, it's kind of interesting because that means that Obito thinks that Madara might be able to like rewind time for a few seconds in battle. So that's also something to heavily consider in this matchup. I just thought it was a funny detail that that thing of all things might actually be canon to the Naruto anime. So other than that, guys, till next time.